In this video, I'm about to show you 10 applesauce pouch brands you should never buy and why, along with 5 that are actually safe, healthy, and worth it, starting with number 10, Go-Go Squeeze. Let's start with something almost every parent has tossed into a lunchbox without a second thought, Go-Go Squeezy. It's positioned as the easy win, 100% fruit, no added sugar. Clean, simple, convenient. And that's exactly why it works. But here's what that pouch quietly changes. When you take a whole apple and turn it into a smooth puree, you're not just changing the texture, you're changing how the body processes it. A typical Go-Go Squeezy pouch contains around 12 grams of naturally occurring sugar and only about 1 gram of fiber. That imbalance matters. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition has shown that processed fruit forms, such as purees and juices, lead to faster glucose absorption than whole fruit, even when the sugar content is identical. Then there's the behavior side, which most people never think about. A 2025 review in Nutrition and Dietetics raised concerns that pouch feeding reduces chewing and weakens satiety signaling in children. Kids don't experience fullness the same way when they're squeezing food instead of eating it. And because these pouches are consumed so quickly, it becomes incredibly easy to overconsume without realizing it. Go-Go Squeezy didn't make fruit unhealthy. They made it effortless to consume in a way your body was never designed for. Number 9. Mott's. For most people, Mott's sits in that safe childhood snack category. Something parents buy assuming it's basically just fruit in a pouch, but that perception comes more from branding than what's actually happening inside the product. The biggest issue starts with how natural is being used here. Because on food labels, it isn't a regulated scientific term, and that's exactly why it has been challenged in multiple consumer complaints and legal actions across the industry, including cases where natural fruit products were questioned over the presence of pesticide residues, like acetamiprid traces, not necessarily as a direct safety panic, but as a transparency gap between marketing language and agricultural reality. Then there's the actual structure of the product itself. Apples are no longer in their whole form. They're processed into a smooth puree and heat-treated for shelf stability, which removes the natural fiber structure that normally slows down sugar absorption, meaning the body processes it more like a fast-digesting carbohydrate source rather than a whole fruit, a pattern consistently discussed in nutritional research, comparing whole fruit versus fruit purees in journals like the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. And finally, there's the industry reality that most consumers never think about. These products are designed for long shelf life, mass distribution, and child-friendly consumption speed, not for preserving the original eating behavior of fruit, which is chewing, slowing down, and naturally regulating intake. So what looks like a simple applesauce pouch is actually a highly engineered convenience food shaped more by processing needs than by how fruit was originally meant to be consumed. Number 8. Treetop Applesauce. Treetop carries a very specific kind of trust before you even open the pouch. It feels closer to an orchard than a factory because the branding leans heavily on its grower-owned cooperative identity, but that perception does most of the work, not the product itself. The reality is that this applesauce still goes through the same large-scale industrial processing pipeline as any other shelf-stable fruit puree, where apples are sorted, heat-treated, and broken down into a uniform texture designed for long storage and mass distribution, which is necessary for consistency but completely changes how the fruit exists as a food compared to its original form. What makes Treetop interesting in the market is not what it adds, but what the branding makes you assume, because for growers, it quietly translates in the consumer mind into minimally processed, even though the final product is still engineered for shelf life, transport efficiency, and standardized taste across millions of units. So the real product being sold here is not just applesauce, but the idea of orchard freshness packaged into a system that operates at an industrial scale, and that gap between perception and production is where most consumers never look closely enough. Number 7. Lucky Leaf Applesauce. Lucky Leaf is one of those names that feels almost old-fashioned in a comforting way, the kind of label you'd associate with simple pantry staples and family kitchens, but that familiarity is exactly what gives it an advantage in a category where trust matters more than scrutiny. The interesting part about Lucky Leaf isn't a long list of additives or a dramatic ingredient controversy, because the product itself is relatively straightforward, but the real story lies in how simplicity is packaged and interpreted by consumers, where a short ingredient list creates the assumption of being closer to whole fruit nutrition than it actually is in practice. Once apples are converted into a smooth, heat-stable puree, the product shifts from being something you bite and chew into something you essentially consume in a fast, uniform texture, which changes eating behavior more than most people realize, not in a dramatic or toxic way, but in how quickly it can be consumed without natural pauses like chewing and texture breakdown. Lucky Leaf benefits from this subtle psychological gap between simple ingredients and whole food experience, where the label feels transparent, but the eating experience is still fully processed and engineered for convenience, shelf stability, and consistent taste across batches rather than anything resembling a fresh apple. So what you get is not deception in the aggressive sense, but a quiet example of how minimal ingredient lists can still exist inside a highly processed food system that feels much more natural than it actually is. Number 6. Matern. Most people don't even recognize it on the shelf, but they've definitely consumed it, because behind a lot of private label and widely distributed fruit pouches, this is one of the key industrial producers powering the category. And that's where the real story starts. Not in the ingredients, but in the business model. Unlike brands that sell a family orchard image or nostalgic trust, Matern operates more like a B2B food manufacturer, supplying large-scale retailers and global snack brands with applesauce products that are then rebranded under different names. So what the consumer sees as different brands on shelves is often the same underlying production system with minor variations in packaging and labeling. This changes how you should think about the product entirely, because the competition here is not really between individual brands. It's about manufacturing efficiency, cost optimization, and shelf stability contracts at an industrial scale. The apples themselves are sourced in massive agricultural volumes, processed into puree, standardized for texture and taste consistency, and then distributed across global retail networks, where branding becomes the only real differentiator at the consumer level. So Matern isn't just an applesauce brand. It represents the invisible supply chain layer of the entire category, where the product is less about identity and more about being a scalable base ingredient for multiple retail ecosystems, most of which the average buyer never connects back to a single manufacturer. Number 5. Field Day. Field Day looks like it belongs in the Better Choice section of the grocery store, with simple packaging, clean design, and that quiet, organic-style branding that instantly signals affordability with a healthier edge, especially for shoppers trying to avoid overly processed snacks without paying premium prices. But the interesting angle here isn't what's inside the jar. It's how private label branding reshapes perception of quality without necessarily changing the underlying product category in a meaningful way. Field Day is primarily a co-op private label brand, which means it doesn't behave like a traditional food company with a single identity or proprietary formula. Instead, it operates across multiple suppliers and production sources, depending on distribution contracts, retailer partnerships, and regional supply availability. That means two identical-looking products under the same label can come from different production lines over time while still meeting the same baseline specification. What this creates is a product experience that feels consistent on the shelf, but is actually built on supply flexibility rather than brand consistency, something most consumers never consider when choosing between applesauce options. And because the packaging emphasizes simplicity and value, consumers often mentally upgrade it into a cleaner category, even though the real differentiator is not nutritional transformation, but procurement strategy and retail positioning. Number 4. Wild Harvest. Wild Harvest is positioned in a space where most people don't even compare it directly with other applesauce brands. They compare it with their idea of what organic grocery shopping should feel like, and that's where the product quietly benefits before you even look at the ingredients. Wild Harvest exists in a category where organic doesn't automatically mean premium luxury, so it is strategically positioned between budget applesauce and high-end organic brands, making it feel like a smart middle option rather than a compromise. This positioning influences how people justify the purchase. It feels like an upgrade to your choice without changing your shopping habits too much, which is a powerful retail psychology trigger in itself. Instead of relying on shock value ingredients or controversy, the brand competes on price perception and category placement, where being affordable organic becomes the main selling point, rather than any unique product identity. So the real story here isn't what's inside the pouch or how it's made, it's how the product is positioned in your decision-making process, where it quietly becomes the reasonable upgrade choice in a shelf full of extremes. Number 3. Nature's Promise. Nature's Promise feels like a product designed to remove doubt before you even think about it. The name, the soft packaging, and the natural messaging all work together to create instant confidence at the shelf level. But what makes this brand interesting is not how it's made, but how it is used in retail strategy. Instead of competing as a standalone food brand, Nature's Promise operates as a store-led product identity that spans multiple categories, meaning its real function is to give shoppers an easy, safe choice within that store's ecosystem without requiring them to compare outside options. This changes behavior in a subtle way. People aren't just buying applesauce, they're choosing the store's definition of what a better choice looks like, which reduces comparison thinking and speeds up decision-making in a crowded aisle. So the value here isn't the uniqueness of production or controversy, it's decision simplification at the retail level, where the brand exists less as a food identity and more as a shortcut in the shopper's decision-making process. Number 2. Full Circle Market. Full Circle Market looks like it belongs to that clean grocery category where the packaging does most of the talking. Soft colors, simple fonts, and a name that instantly makes it feel like a safer, more thoughtful choice, even before you check anything else. But the reality is, this brand isn't defined by a single product story. It operates as a store-driven private label system, which means different products under the same name can come from different manufacturing setups depending on supply contracts and category needs. And that's where the interesting part starts. Because what looks like one unified clean brand on the shelf is actually a rotating network of suppliers producing under the same label as long as they meet the required organic or retail standards set by the chain. That system recently showed its weak spot when a Full Circle Market frozen dessert product was pulled back after an ingredient labeling mismatch involving undeclared allergens, highlighting how complex multi-supplier production can sometimes create gaps between packaging and actual contents. At the same time, the applesauce line itself remains very simple on paper, typically built on basic organic apple formulations with minimal processing and standard sweetening variations by version. Number 1. Simple Truth. Simple Truth doesn't come across like a product trying to impress you. It feels more like something already placed in your cart by default, like the decision has been softened before you even reach it on the shelf. When you look at applesauce pouches in general, the reality is that they sit in one of the simplest processed food categories in the store. Most unsweetened versions contain only apples and water, sometimes a small amount of vitamin C for preservation, which is why the ingredient list stays unusually short compared to most packaged snacks. Nutrition data across standard retail versions show these pouches typically contain around 50-60 calories per serving, with sugars coming almost entirely from the fruit itself, rather than from added sweeteners, which is why the product feels light compared to most snack options aimed at the same audience. So there's no overcomplication here, no heavy formulation story, just a very basic fruit-based product that's been portioned and packaged for convenience. And that's really where it stands out, in its own quiet way. Not by pushing attention, not by claiming anything extreme, but by staying simple enough that it easily blends into everyday shopping without forcing a second thought. But don't worry, it's not all bad. There are still a few applesauce pouch brands that are surprisingly better choices, tasty, satisfying, and made with fewer unnecessary additives, starting with number 5, Peter Rabbit Organics. Peter Rabbit Organics stands in a very straightforward lane within the applesauce pouch category. It's built around simple fruit purees portioned for on-the-go use, especially for kids' snacks and lunchboxes. Most of the lineup follows a very minimal structure, often combining organic fruits like apple, peach, mango, or banana, depending on the pouch variant, with ingredient lists that stay short and close to the original fruit source, rather than adding complex formulations. From a nutrition standpoint, these pouches generally fall in the 60-90 calorie range per serving, with sugars coming primarily from natural fruit content and no heavy reliance on added fats or sodium, which keeps them aligned with standard fruit puree profiles in the category. What really defines this product isn't complexity or reinvention. It's the simplicity of keeping fruit in a stabilized, portable format that can be carried, stored, and consumed easily without changing what the base ingredient already is. So, instead of trying to behave like a heavily modified snack, Peter Rabbit Organics stays close to a basic fruit identity and focuses on convenience packaging rather than altering the core nature of applesauce or fruit puree. Number 4. Happy Baby Organics. Happy Baby Organics is built around one very specific reality. It's not designed as a general snack. It's designed for early feeding moments when convenience and softness matter most. The pouch format itself is doing most of the work here. It removes the need for utensils, reduces mess, and allows controlled portions that can be handled quickly during travel, daycare, or feeding routines where timing is tight. The ingredient approach stays simple across most versions, relying on basic fruit purees like apple or blended fruit combinations without turning it into a heavily engineered snack product. What separates it from standard applesauce brands is not complexity, but purpose. It's built for a very narrow use case: children's early diet, and everything from packaging size to texture is aligned with that function. So instead of competing as a mainstream snack, it exists in a more focused lane where usability and ease of feeding define its value more than anything in the recipe itself. Number 3. Plum Organics. Plum Organics is less about being a general applesauce brand and more about being part of a broader infant food system where products are designed to fit into early feeding stages with minimal effort required of the caregiver. The pouch format serves a functional role here. It's designed for controlled portions and direct consumption, especially in situations where a traditional feeding setup isn't practical, such as travel or on-the-go childcare. Instead of trying to stand out through variety or complexity, the product line stays aligned with a standardized approach to fruit-based purees, where consistency across batches and simplicity of consumption matter most. Its position in the market stems from fitting into structured feeding routines, rather than competing as a mainstream snack option, positioning it in a very specific usage environment rather than a general grocery category. Number 2. Earth's Best. Earth's Best is one of the early organic baby food brands that expanded into pouch-based fruit formats as retail demand shifted towards single-serve, shelf-stable snacks. The applesauce pouch here serves as a processed fruit delivery format, a heat-treated, sealed fruit puree in flexible packaging that extends shelf life and reduces spoilage compared to handling fresh fruit. Across its apple-based variants, the formulation typically remains centered on fruit puree, without moving into complex multi-layer snack construction, keeping the ingredient structure relatively straightforward within the constraints of packaged food standards. What places it in this category is its alignment with standardized retail baby food systems, rather than any distinct product innovation. It follows the same industry pattern in which fruit is converted into portable, sealed servings that can be stored and consumed on demand without preparation. Number 1. Once Upon a Farm. Once Upon a Farm is where the applesauce pouch category quietly shifts direction, and you can feel it immediately, because this one doesn't even pretend to sit in the standard shelf-stable world the same way as everyone else. Instead of relying on long-life pantry positioning, it moves into a chilled system. That alone changes how it behaves in stores, how it's stored, and even how people perceive it on the shelf. It's not competing in the same grab-and-go from any cabinet mindset. It's built around refrigeration from the start. Inside the pouch, the idea is still fruit at the core apple-based blends, sometimes mixed with other fruits. But the real difference isn't the recipe, it's the direction. This is fruit being treated closer to fresh food than a fully stabilized snack product. And that's the key point. This brand isn't trying to blend into the traditional applesauce category. It sits slightly outside it, using cold storage as its identity shift, which automatically separates it from the standard pouch lineup that dominates grocery aisles.